Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to the first session of the Leadership Speaker Series at Gemini Solutions. Today, we have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Tushar Kansal. He is the founder and CEO of Consultancy Ventures. He has more than 2 decades of experience in venture capital, Big Four consulting, and um, he has been awarded the Business Leader of the Year in Investment Management by Asian African Chamber of Commerce and Industry in 2021. His expert opinion is often sought in various news channels like CNN News 18, BCTV Business World, and all. So it's my deep pleasure to welcome Mr. Tushar Kansal to our series. Mr. Kansal, let's just start right away. Um, you have a lot of experience in the venture capital space and you're a serial entrepreneur yourself. So, can you help us understand as to what does this ecosystem really look like and what are really the investors looking for in a new firm that they would like to invest in?
Thing is the problem statement, that what is the problem you are solving through your business. And second thing is the solution, that what is the solution you have come up with, how that solution includes maybe technology to solve that problem statement. And the third thing they want is to know the team, how balanced is your team, and how many different uh, uh, how healthy is the mix of the team, whether it has finance people, IT, marketing, and the mix of the team. Because if the team is good, they can always keep on changing business models and make it more better. Then they want to know the market size, that what is the market size you are addressing. Because if you are addressing a very low market size, then the valuations won't go very high. Then they want to see the product what you have created. So like giving them a product demo is something which you can do anytime. The most important thing apart from product is the business model, that how do you earn from that uh, business. And then the traction, that how much money you are making right now, how many customers you have, how many downloads you have, how many active subscribers you have. And also the competition, the competitor analysis, that which are the companies who are your direct competitors. And if you are giving competitor analysis to them, then you also give them competitive advantages, that how is your company better than competition. And then the 5-year financial projections, how will the money which they are investing, how will it go in, how will it uh, result in a business. And how the returns will come, and then cash flows will turn positive. And what will be the return on capital period. Then they also want to know how much money you are asking for, and how will you use the funds. And if you are a consumer company which has already created a nice little product which sells well, then they are happy to give you marketing dollars, even like 90% of the proceeds which they are investing. And lastly, the future roadmap, as in uh, how will you be in another 1 year's time, 2 years time, 3 years time, how many subscribers you will have. And so basically the investors are looking for all these things. But having said that, the earlier you are in terms of asking money from the investor, maybe you are zero revenue, you are pre-revenue, you are pre-seed. The more you are early, the more they will look at the team. And essentially they would be betting on the team. And so these are the broad uh, facets of the investors as of now. So Amendra.
Yes, Mr. Tushar, I think that sounds quite good, but it also sounds that there are a lot of clauses for example, there's a lot of term sheet that needs to be signed with the VC and all. So, what are these usual clauses that you would have seen being signed?
Well, in today's times, exits, the investors are particular about the exits. So they would typically want to have clauses on exits like in how much time will you be coming out with an IPO? And also, in case you are not able to come out with an IPO, then the company will buy back the shares, giving the promised internal rate of return IRR to the investor. And if the company is not able to buy back the shares, then the founders will buy back the shares by giving the promised return to the investor. And if that doesn't happen, then you will find a third investor who can give an exit to the earlier investor. If that doesn't happen, then there can be a merger and acquisition, maybe a cash swap deal. And apart from that, there are drag along and tag along clauses which help the investor secure himself. And nowadays, for those founders who are very young, they have a tendency to leave the company early. And without them, without the founders, the company won't go anywhere. So there is uh, nowadays they keep a clause which says that all the equity of the founders is assigned to the investor, and they will have a right to earn back the equity in the subsequent years. um, and if they leave the company in between, then they lose a right uh, on that equity. So the investor has a right to take their equity and sell it to any third investor. And then apart from that, there are the rights of the investors like voting rights, seats on the board of directors. Then there are certain reserved matters which they keep in the annexure, and the investors' permission has to be taken on those reserves matters no matter what. And they have information rights that they can call for audited and unaudited accounts of the company. And apart from that, the valuations are running quite good. It is a very good time for startup founders to raise funding. And we are seeing that between the space between two rounds has shortened. So earlier the rounds used to happen between 12 to 18 months, and now they are happening between 3 to 6 months. And the valuation is growing 5 times, 10 times within 3 to 6 months. And there is a company which was there in the news only 3 4 days back. It became a unicorn in 9 months. So this company started off, and within 9 months, its valuation reached $1 billion. So this is the kind of crazy money which is available out there. And and the investors are increasingly keeping an approach saying that they would want to enter no matter what. And so they just check the basic things like the wow factor, and whether this product will become the it can replace the earlier products easily. And checking the precedent of the team, checking the creation of the product, the minimum viable product, MVP, and then just moving along and investing. And and there are some anti-dilution clauses which the investors are also uh, keeping nowadays, which means that when new uh, rounds happen, then the earlier investors' equity used to get diluted. That we will have anti-dilution clauses, so their equity won't get
Mr. Kansul, we are losing your bit on audio there. Yeah, yeah. Now we can hear you.
okay, sure, yeah. So I hope I answered your
Yes,
question. I was
there is
able
a
to explain.
supporting question which also came from the chat, and it turns out that a lot of due diligence is also required. So, is there something which is very key to this particular process, and then when you carry it out in terms of an investor into such a firm? Because you also said it's about investing in the team, right?
Yeah, I mean, see, end of the day, if you look at venture capital investing as a skill, then actually VCs really like a team that has this capacity to recruit world class skills and to capture the hearts and minds of the people that really matter in the industry. One can diligence that, even remotely, but you sort of feel it immediately when you sit in a room and talk to someone who really knows their stuff. And secondly, market is big enough that it can create massive business over time. So one is the team, second is the market, and third is that VCs would like to see a fundamentally different shaded product, one that has the capacity to really stand out with just a modest amount of marketing. So these three very simplistic arguments, they held many years ago, and they still hold true for a lot of VCs today. But due diligence, then if you are into series C, series D and further rounds, then they do a very exhaustive due diligence which can last for 1 to 3 months. But if you are in the earlier stages, they would like to see the hygiene factors first, that they would talk to some people from your past company, seeing that you were actually doing what you claim to do. And then if you are a product company, they might talk to one or two distributors, maybe one from abroad, one from India. And then on the company formation and compliance front, they would keep a check on the audited accounts and your accountant. So these are the basic ones which will happen in case you are looking for funds early, and you are early in the game.
That sounds good. I'll move on to one of the themes that you picked up, which was valuation. And you mentioned like the companies like Mensa Brands, which has picked up a $1 billion valuation in 9 months. So, how does this valuation as a theme play out, given that most of the asset classes are on fire? And similar, just like we take to the example of cryptocurrency, right? So in this entire space, do you think, for example, it is an asset class where you can have some valuation? Let's say somebody has launched a crypto product, a new coin or something like that, and we can value it. How is the valuation theme playing out in these asset classes or in general?
Well, the the valuation, if you ask me frankly, earlier we used to do it by discounted cash flows, and we also used to check the transaction multiples which are prevailing in other transactions which are happening in the market. And we used to use those multiples on our financial performance, value the company. And in some cases, we used to do market multiples where we used to check similar companies which are listed on the stock exchange, and then get some multiples from how they are trading, at what value they are trading, and use those multiples on our financial performance. Then we used to have some net asset value, NAV basis valuation for asset heavy companies. And but nowadays, for all purposes, we are using discounted cash flows, which give a very good idea about the 5-year cash flow performance of the company. And apart from that, if you are a tech company, which suppose you are an app which has a number of subscribers and downloads, then we are using these metrics quite a lot. In fact, one of the ways in which these companies have become unicorns is by quoting their active subscribers and quoting their number of downloads and number of installs, and using those figures from competitors, coming out, like we were doing a check on Unacademy's valuation, and we saw that it has a $3.4 billion valuation on a active subscriber base of I think it was 50 million. So we came out with a figure of $69 per subscriber. And any company which has, suppose, 1 million subscribers, and the value going on is $69 per subscriber in the edtech space, then clearly that company can that its value is $69 million. So it is not only the financial performance of the company, but all these metrics which are increasingly being used to do valuations in today's times. And our company, we actually do documentation, pitch deck, valuation, business plans, financial modeling. In that, we usually use discounted cash flow for doing valuations of the company. But in case there is a need to support the valuation of the company by other means, then we are doing that also.
Um, so, Mr. Tushar, you mentioned a few terms which are very usual for MBA or CFO folks, like DCF, your valuations and cash flows, everything else. But if we narrow it down to our sector, which is the IT sector, how do you think it looks like? Let me ask a quick question in terms of for a student in today's world, right? Just like you had started off in a case, was just joined a firm in an IT firm. How do you feel it should be the academic strategy for a student in today's times?
Well, we are living in times where if you are able to demonstrate your skill level to any person in a matter of 15 minutes to 1 hour or maybe half an hour, that person will definitely consider you in his team, because they need people who can solve problems. End of the day, whether it is professional world or personal world, the whole life is about solving different kind of problems. And uh, in case you are able to solve a technical problem, you have enough know-how, but you don't have an engineering degree, then I don't think there would be many startups who will refuse you in their team. Rather, they will welcome you. And if you look at also from a macro perspective, the US government was the first to announce that for the interviews which get conducted for government positions in the US, a degree won't be required. And Elon Musk went on to say that in any of his companies, a degree won't be required. So we are living in times where skill matters more than degree, and there are enough education technology companies and platforms available. Vedantu, Coursera, Khan Academy, Unacademy, Byju's. You have edX, and you have so much of easily explainable material, even available for free on YouTube, on different websites, on education technology websites, that one can develop any skill without much effort. And in case you want to upskill and cross skill yourself, then an approach of knowing which skill to have and then going ahead and taking it is more important, in today's times. And so, my answer to you would be that probably one way of doing it is you start working in a startup, and within 1 or 2 years, because you'll be handling all the kind of non-process based stuff, then you will be able to manage to get a lot of skills which can take you further in your career. And in case you have a good idea about the technology in which you are working for, you will be able to spot the right startup, which and which can probably give you some ESOPs as well. And but this is very sad that in today's times also, if a person has to make a career in technology, in artificial intelligence, machine learning, or any such stuff, then the person has to necessarily go in through the engineering route. And the engineering colleges are still persisting with their old style of teaching, and the students have to actually do everything themselves to upskill themselves, to properly train themselves. So I wish there were more companies coming out openly in India, saying that we don't require degrees, and we just would check the skills. Just like there is a lot of flexibility in the American university and the US and the international universities to pick and choose subjects and to choose the toughness of the subject as well. So I think, it's high time that the education system in India changes itself and offers not only more variety but also makes it more customizable for people to pick and choose what they want to learn and what their interest area is.
That's an interesting point, Mr. Tushar, about the education sector. But I'm happy you picked up 2 points which we value. One is problem solving and the startup culture. So we pride ourselves in the fact that we have a lot of smart people who have the problem solving ability. But these young guys and girls, they have kind of a conflicting thought in their mind as to if, let's say, I have a great idea and I want to seek some VC funding, what should I do? But at the same time, they're also thinking, is my idea going to stay safe and secure and be with me and thoughts like that. So since you have done so many deals in this equity funding space, it would be good for our audience to know how your company, for example, helps in raising funds.
Well, we have a whole ecosystem. It has been a lot of time in the market. We have wined and dined with investors, and we understand their psychology because we talk to them day in and day out. And so what we do is, the way we work on it is, we first create the collaterals, and the collaterals include the pitch deck, valuation, and the financial model. And this takes around 2 to 4 weeks. After that, we train the founders in frequently asked questions, in unit economics, in we are always there to negotiate the term sheet on behalf of the client. And we also help them save a lot of time on the due diligence, and we help them with the shareholders agreement. And because we are offering all these facilities to the startup people, so a lot of companies, in fact, I have personally interacted with more than 7,000 startups in the last 5 to 6 years. And a lot of people who come to us, they want to demystify startup funding. And our services are end to end. Usually we sign a 3-month engagement, and we raise funding in that time. And we have already raised a huge amount of funding for a lot of agri-tech, fintech, food tech, edutech, and deep tech, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics. I've raised a lot of funding for even traditional industries like chocolate manufacturing or microbreweries. And this is what we do. And a lot of our work is actually mentoring the startup founders, and talking to them, and making them understand how to go about this whole piece. And many stages we see that the startups are uh, actually in a stage where now they are looking for either to sell out, or they want to get merged into another company. So we have a lot of mergers and acquisition play also going on all at the same time.
That was the last question I had, Mr. Tushar Kansal. Uh, on behalf of Gemini, we thank you very much and appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. We know everybody out here really learned a lot from your experience and your words of guidance that you shared with us. Once again, we are very thankful for you to come here and oblige us with your thoughts, and we'll be happy to invite you again. Thanks a lot, Mr. Kansal. Thank you so much.